So, here's a thought to start us off. What if the reality you experience, the solid world around you, isn't actually the fundamental layer of existence? What if it's more like a representation of something deeper?
That's a pretty big question, right? It definitely challenges how we usually think about things.
Exactly. And exploring those kinds of challenging ideas is what we do here on the Deep Dive. Today, we're using some material listeners sent in to really get into a philosophical idea called analytic idealism.
Think of this as maybe a way to quickly get up to speed on a really interesting kind of cutting-edge view of consciousness and reality.
Yeah, a bit of a shortcut through some complex thinking, but we should acknowledge it's not always easy to grasp.
No, it definitely isn't. Like we heard from a listener, POI Anderson from Denmark, who pointed out that wrestling with the idea that reality outside our own heads is mental. Well, that's a tough one.
Absolutely. The idea that, say, this microphone or the chair I'm sitting on isn't fundamentally physical in the way we assume, it's a bit mind-bending.
It really is.
So that's kind of our mission for this deep dive. Let's unpack the core ideas of analytic idealism, especially this claim that reality is fundamentally mental. We'll look at what that implies, but, try to keep it clear and avoid getting lost in jargon.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
How about with the brain? That seems like a good entry point.
Okay, yeah. So think about your brain. It's a physical thing.
Right.
Doctors can scan it, study it. It's made of matter.
Uh-huh.
But that physical organ, that lump of matter, is also directly connected to your entire inner world. Your thoughts, feelings, hopes, fears.
Yeah.
Even just tasting something, like the sweetness of chocolate.
All that subjective stuff.
Exactly. All your subjective experience, it correlates with activity in that physical brain. Now, analytic idealism takes that idea and kind of scales it up to the whole universe.
Whoa, okay. So if my brain is like the physical readout, maybe, of my mental life.
Yeah, like a dashboard representation.
Right, a dashboard. Then analytic idealism is saying that all matter, everything out there, is basically a dashboard representing underlying mental states. Is that it?
That's the core proposal. This underlying mental reality is often called mind at large.
Okay, mind at large. But wait, does that mean if I stop looking at something, it disappears? Yeah. Like the old tree falling in the forest problem.
Ah, good question. No, not exactly. It's not saying things pop out of existence when unobserved. The key is that the appearance of matter, the way it looks as physical matter, needs a dashboard. It needs an observer in a very broad sense.
An observer, like a conscious being.
Essentially, yes. Think about an airplane cockpit again. The pilot sees dials showing speed, altitude, fuel. Those dials are representations. If a plane is parked, the dials might read 0, but the plane still exists, the air outside still exists, the laws of physics still apply. So in analytic idealism, the physical world we perceive is like those dials. It's the representation of the underlying mental reality, mind at large. If there's no pilot, no observer to create that specific representation, the appearance as perceived matter isn't there, but the underlying mental reality it represents, that continues.
Right, got it. So this mind at large, what exactly is that? Is it like God? And how do our individual minds, like mine and yours, fit into this picture? And I guess the big question, why should we even believe this mind at large exists? Is there proof?
Okay, lots to unpack there. So mind at large is basically the term for all the mental states that correspond to what we see as the inanimate universe. Stars, rocks, planets, the whole lot.
The stuff that isn't alive.
Right. And our individual minds. We're seen as, localized parts of it, maybe like whirlpools or eddies within this larger ocean of mentality. We're fundamentally part of it, just dissociated or differentiated from the main flow.
Okay. And the proof part?
Well, this is where metaphysics differs from, say, physics. As the source material hints, metaphysics isn't really about finding empirical proof like in a lab. It's more about finding the best explanation.
The most logical and comprehensive story that fits what we observe.
Exactly. The most coherent, the simplest explanation that covers all the bases, including our own conscious experience. The argument goes something like this. If the matter of my brain is the outside view of my inner thoughts and feelings.
The dashboard idea again.
Right. Then, by analogy, it's logical to assume that the matter of the rest of the universe, which is made of the same fundamental stuff, is also the outside view of some kind of mental inner life. And that collection of mental states is mind at large.
And the fact that we all seem to perceive a shared world supports this.
That's part of the argument, yeah. We can agree that there's a table here, that the sun is shining. Analytic idealism suggests this shared reality arises because we're all observing the same underlying mental states of mind at large, just from our individual perspectives.
Okay, that naturally leads to thinking about purpose. If this mind at large is the foundation, does it have a goal? Is it trying to do something? And what about us, humanity? What's our role in all this? Are we just like passive observers?
That's a huge question. Analytic idealism, being generally naturalistic, doesn't necessarily posit an external purpose given by some separate creator god. The laws of physics might just be the inherent way this universal consciousness behaves. Its habits, you could say.
So maybe no grand plan from outside.
Perhaps not externally imposed,
right?
But if you look at how the universe has unfolded, from the Big Bang, the quick emergence of life, once Earth cooled down, the way life diversified, there seems to be this strong internal drive towards, towards life.
And complexity.
And complexity, yeah, leading eventually to us, humans. Yeah. And what's arguably unique about us...
our self-awareness, thinking about thinking, metacognition.
Exactly. So one speculative idea, as mentioned in the source, is that maybe we are the universe becoming aware of itself.
Yeah.
The metacognitive eyes of nature are looking back at itself.
No.
It's a thought, right? That maybe nature's own spontaneous instinct is towards developing this self-reflection. Think about the cost, though. Billions of years of evolution, suffering, extinction.
And the risk, too. We can mess it all up.
Absolutely. We have that capacity. So from this view, our self-awareness isn't just an accident. It could be what this whole cosmic process has been, maybe striving towards, finally achieving a way to know itself.
That's quite a perspective. It makes evolution seem less random somehow. You also mentioned earlier that all life is conscious, even like bacteria. That sounds pretty radical compared to standard biology.
It does, from a conventional standpoint. But in analytic idealism, consciousness isn't something that emerges from complex matter. It's fundamental. So the question becomes, what's the marker for an individual, dissociated conscious viewpoint?
And the answer is?
Metabolism. Biological life. If something is metabolizing, actively maintaining itself as distinct from its environment, that's seen as the outward sign of an inward, private, conscious point of view. A dissociated alter within mind at large.
So, a bacterium, because it metabolizes, has its own tiny little subjective experience.
That's the idea. Its own what it's like to be that bacterium. But something like a rock or even a virus which needs to hijack a living cell's metabolism, they wouldn't have their own consciousness in the same way. The key is that internal self-sustaining process metabolism as the signature of dissociation.
This really flips the usual script, doesn't it? Normally we think the brain creates consciousness, but here the brain is just what consciousness looks like from the outside.
Precisely. That's the radical shift.
Yeah.
Before the Enlightenment, many thinkers actually believed mind was primary, that it somehow produced the body. The brain creates mind idea is relatively recent.
Huh. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and even modern neuroscience is often careful, talking about correlations between brain activity and experience, not necessarily strict causation. Analytic idealism says, look, the brain isn't the source of mind, it's the image of mind.
Like smoke is the image of fire.
That's a great analogy. Smoke doesn't create the fire, it's just what the process of combustion looks like. Yeah. Similarly, the brain is what mental processes look like when observed externally. All the evidence brain injuries affecting thought, drugs, altering perception fits perfectly. You change the appearance, the brain, and it corresponds to a change in the underlying reality, the mental process.
Okay, so if matter isn't fundamental, what is it then? How does it fit in?
Matter, consistently, is just what mind looks like, always. The incredible variety of stuff we see in the universe, stars, planets, teacups, brains, reflects the incredible variety of mental states and dynamics within mind at large.
So my brain looks like my thoughts and feelings, and a distant galaxy looks like whatever the mental states of that part of mind at large are.
Exactly. And physicists. They're studying the dashboard. They're finding patterns and relationships between the different readings on that dashboard, the material appearances. That's super valuable. Like a pilot needing their instruments.
But they might mistake the instruments for the plane itself, or the sky outside.
That's the potential pitfall, yeah. Mistaking the representation, the dashboard, for the ultimate reality it represents. Thinking the physical correlations are the fundamental causes, instead of reflections of underlying mental causes.
You mentioned appearances arise through dissociation. Can you explain that a bit more? How does this one big mind split into seeming distinct things?
Right, dissociation. Appearances only happen when there's a boundary, a separation between an observer and the observed. If everything is just one unified whole, there's nothing to appear to. You need an outside perspective.
Okay.
Analytic idealism calls this boundary a dissociative boundary. Think of it like a split or fragmentation within the universal mind field, allowing different parts to observe each other, so to speak.
Like looking at someone else's brain scan while they're thinking.
Perfect example. You, the observer, are outside your dissociative boundary. The person being scanned is inside their boundary. What you see on the scanner, the physical brain activity, is what their internal thoughts look like from your external dissociative perspective.
So the act of dissociation itself creates the appearance of matter.
Essentially, yes. Matter arises spontaneously with the boundary. It's simply how mental reality appears across that divide.
Okay, but what about evolution? Darwin's theory is all about physical changes in organisms over time. How does that fit if consciousness is first? Doesn't it contradict evolution?
It doesn't contradict the evidence for evolution, but it reinterprets what that evidence means. Instead of seeing evolution as material changes eventually sparking consciousness, it sees evolution as the history of dissociation, the story of how these dissociated alters within mind at large developed. The very first life form, that was the first dissociation, and that's when matter, as its external appearance, also arose.
So natural selection is shaping these dissociated mental structures.
Exactly. Shaping them to become more complex, better at surviving and reproducing, which means better at maintaining their state of dissociation. The physical bodies, the claws, the eyes, the brains, those are the outward forms of these evolving mental dynamics. We're not throwing out Darwin. We're just putting his observations into a different consciousness-first context.
Got it. Now, what about that common objection? You know, you stick a pin in someone's arm, a physical event, and they feel pain, a mental event. That seems like pretty clear physical cause, mental effect.
Yeah, that's a classic one. But it usually comes from assuming mind and matter are fundamentally separate things to begin with. That's dualism.
Right.
Analytic idealism says there's no fundamental split. The physical event, the pin going into the skin, is itself a mental process appearing physically to an observer.
So the pin isn't really physical in the first place.
It's an appearance of a mental process outside your individual bubble of consciousness, interacting with your bubble across that dissociative boundary. What that interaction looks like is a pin-piercing skin. The feeling of pain is another mental process inside your bubble, caused by the first mental process, which looked like a pin. It's all mental, interacting with mental. No need for two separate realms.
Okay, that takes a moment to sink in. We talked about bacteria and humans both being conscious, but obviously there's a massive difference in the quality of that consciousness. How does this model account for that?
Yeah, clearly a bacterium isn't pondering philosophy. The difference lies in the complexity of the underlying mental dynamics within each dissociated alter.
So more complex inner mental life means a more complex organism and richer consciousness.
Exactly. A human brain, which is incredibly complex physically, is the appearance of an incredibly complex and structured inner mental life, capable of things like self-reflection, abstract thought, and so on. A bacterium's simple structure reflects a much simpler, more rudimentary form of subjective experience. Evolution is the story of that mental complexity increasing over time, manifesting as increasingly complex physical forms.
This connects to ideas about perception, right? Like Kant saying we only know appearances, phenomena, not the thing in itself, the noumena. How does analytic idealism relate to that?
It generally agrees with Kant that we mainly access the world through appearances through our dashboard. But Bernardo Kastrup, a key proponent of this view, adds a twist. He argues we do have direct access to one piece of noumena, our own consciousness. We don't just see representations of our feelings or thoughts, we feel them directly. There's a what it's like to be us.
So we know ourselves from the inside.
Exactly. And what do we find when we look inside? Thoughts, emotions, sensations, mental stuff. The challenge is trying to imagine the inner life of mind at large, or a rock, or a star, based on our own experience. It's hard to extrapolate.
So how can we say the world is objectively real if it's all fundamentally subjective?
That's where perspectival objectivity comes in. The world is objective from our shared perspective. Your thoughts are objectively real to me. They exist whether I'm thinking about them or not. Likewise, the world we all experience is objectively real for us, even if its ultimate ground is the subjectivity of mind at large.
Okay. This talk of universal consciousness inevitably brings up, well, God. Is a mind at large just another word for God?
It depends heavily on how you define God. If you think of traditional attributes like omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, well, universal consciousness in this model is technically omnipresent. There's nothing outside it. You could argue it's omniscient in a way, as it contains all experiences, even if distributed, and maybe omnipotent as the ground of all being. But the traditional Western idea often includes a personal deliberating God with intentions. Analytic idealism doesn't necessarily require that. It could just be the spontaneous, instinctive mind of nature. Personally, I lean towards thinking of it as less like a person thinking and more like a fundamental process.
So more like pantheism, God is the universe, or panentheism, God is in the universe but also beyond it.
It probably aligns better with panentheism, actually. Given that our perception is likely limited by our biology, the ultimate reality, the full scope of universal consciousness, might well extend beyond the physical universe we can currently perceive.
We keep using this word consciousness. Can we actually pin down what it is in this context?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Defining it precisely is notoriously hard. When I use it here, I mainly mean phenomenal consciousness.
Meaning?
The simple capacity for subjective experience. If there's something it is like to be a thing, it has phenomenal consciousness. It doesn't need to be self-aware or intelligent, just feeling, experience itself.
So consciousness is the potential, and experiences are like activations of that potential.
That's a good way to put it. Consciousness is the screen. Experiences are the images playing on it. And when we talk about big C consciousness versus small c consciousness,
Universal versus individual.
right, the idea is there's really only big C. Our individual small c consciousnesses are just temporary patterns, like eddies or whirlpools, dissociated configurations within that one universal consciousness. It feels like we're separate, but that's part of the appearance created by dissociation, like characters in a dream who feel separate until you wake up.
If these dissociative boundaries aren't perfectly solid, does that open the door to explaining weird stuff? Like ghosts, UFOs, telepathy, things outside mainstream science?
Potentially, yes. It offers a framework where such things aren't automatically impossible. If the boundaries between individual minds can be permeable, maybe information or experiences could leak across under certain conditions.
So you might experience something that isn't coming through your normal senses.
Exactly. And because our brains are wired for sensory input, such experiences might seem bizarre or inexplicable, maybe getting interpreted as ghosts or as psychic phenomena. It doesn't prove those things are real, but it suggests a naturalistic mechanism if they turned out to be real. It doesn't automatically rule them out.
Okay, this is maybe the hardest part for me. If time and space aren't fundamental, how do we even talk about things like birth and death? They seem entirely dependent on time.
You're right, it's incredibly difficult because our language and thinking are built on time and space. We almost can't help but talk in those terms.
So how does analytic idealism handle it?
It views time and space as cognitive categories. Tools. Our minds evolve to structure the flow of experience so we aren't overwhelmed. Think of fundamental reality as maybe a timeless crystal of eternity containing all possibilities, all connections.
Not existing in time, but
No,
just
it's not.
existing.
Something like that. Alan Watts had a useful metaphor. Imagine a cat walking behind a fence with just one narrow slit. Through the slit, you see the head, then the body, then the tail. It looks like a sequence, a process unfolding in time.
But it's really just one whole cat existing all at once spatially.
Precisely. Our experience in space-time is like looking through that slit. Dissociation, birth, death. These might be like shadows cast onto our space-time perception by patterns or potentialities within that timeless, spaceless reality. It's a real conceptual leap, no doubt.
Definitely. What about free will? If everything is ultimately mental, maybe even determined, are our choices real or just an illusion?
Again, it depends on what you mean by free will.
Yeah.
If you mean an intrinsic impetus to action, like things happen, change occurs, minds have agency, then yes, analytic idealism supports that. Mind is dynamic.
But what about the feeling that I could have chosen differently? Libertarian free will.
That's trickier. If reality follows consistent principles, even mental ones, then arguably, given the exact state of everything leading up to a choice, only one outcome was possible. You experience making the choice, but maybe you couldn't have done otherwise in those identical conditions.
So maybe no libertarian free will.
It's debatable, but possibly not. However, an interesting point is computational irreducibility. Even if the universe is determined, you can't predict the future without actually running the simulation and letting it unfold.
So even mind at large can't just skip to the end.
Probably not. This means our choices feel genuinely novel and unpredictable. There's real self-discovery in the process. Meaning isn't lost just because things might be determined. Meaning comes from the journey, the experience. And morality still matters intensely because our choices have consequences that shape future states.
You mentioned analytic idealism is non-dualist. What does that mean exactly?
Simply that it doesn't propose two fundamentally different kinds of stuff in the universe, like mind stuff and matter stuff, or subject stuff and object stuff.
It's all just one kind of stuff, mental stuff.
At the most fundamental level, yes. Matter and objects are appearances within that mental reality. Dissociation creates the illusion of a subject-to-object split, but it's not fundamental. In the West, Schopenhauer is another philosopher, often seen as a non-dualist, with his concept of a fundamental will.
Okay, let's talk AI. Huge topic right now. Can machines become conscious from an analytic idealist perspective?
Well, based on the current understanding of an analytic idealism, there's reason to be skeptical about consciousness in today's silicon-based AI.
Why is that?
Two main points. First, as we discussed, the appearance of individual consciousness seems linked to metabolism, which current computers don't do. They process information, but they aren't biologically alive in that self-sustaining way.
Okay, and second?
Second, theories like integrated information theory, while separate, suggest that the way information is processed in current computers lacks the kind of deep integration that might be necessary for subjective experience. It's very segregated. Plus, maybe computer isn't even a fundamental thing, just a label we give to a specific arrangement of inanimate matter.
So probably no consciousness there now. What about the future?
We shouldn't rule things out entirely. Maybe if AI merges with biology, or if quantum computing leads somewhere unexpected, but based on current tech and this philosophical framework, no compelling reason to think AI is conscious.
What are the dangers then if it's not conscious?
The danger might be us mistaking its sophisticated mimicry for real understanding or feeling. If we start thinking complex language models have inner lives, we might devalue actual human consciousness, thinking we're just complex machines too. We need, sober metaphysics and sober politics, managing AI's capabilities and impacts responsibly, maybe thinking about things like universal basic income if jobs are widely displaced.
Makes sense. So finally, looking ahead. If analytic idealism became the mainstream view, how would things change? Science, society.
Big changes, potentially. In science, you might see serious research into areas currently on the fringe, telepathy, placebo, maybe consciousness influencing physical systems. Physics might find more coherent ways to understand quantum mechanics without trying to force it into a purely material box.
And for people generally.
The biggest shift could be in mindset. A deep sense of interconnectedness could foster more empathy, less conflict. The crisis of meaning might ease if people felt part of a larger, meaningful cosmic process of self-discovery. We might also have to re-engage more seriously with the nature of death if consciousness isn't seen as simply ended with the brain.
So potentially profound shifts in how we see ourselves in the universe.
Exactly. It could lead to a much more unified understanding, connecting science, philosophy, and maybe even a sense of the sacred in a new way.
That's a really fascinating journey through a very different way of looking at everything. The core idea that what we see as physical reality is maybe a representation within a fundamentally mental universe. It's a lot to take in.
It definitely provides a different lens, doesn't it? A different angle on those big questions.
It certainly does, a kind of shortcut, as we said, into some very deep waters.
Which leaves us with a final thought for everyone listening. If your own awareness, your consciousness, truly is fundamentally connected to everything else, well, how might knowing that, or even just considering it seriously, change how you live your life day to day, how you interact with the world and the people in it?
Something to definitely ponder. A great place to leave it for this deep dive.